The silence of the room was the first thing that hit me, a heavy, expensive kind of silence that didn't belong in my cramped, one-bedroom apartment. I tried to shift, expecting the familiar lumpy mattress of a tired school teacher, but my hand brushed against silk. Genuine, cool to the touch silk. I bolted upright, my head spinning. The last thing I remembered was the screech of tires and the bright glare of headlights reflected in the screen of my phone. I had been reading The Crown of Thorns for the 10th time, crying over the villain's tragic execution, and then, blackness. Where? My voice came out as a soft, melodic breath. I fumbled for the lamp on the bedside table. When the dim amber light flickered on, I froze. This wasn't my room. The ceilings were vaulted, the furniture was dark mahogany, and the air smelled of sandalwood and expensive cologne. I scrambled toward a full-length mirror in the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. The face in the glass was mine, but perfected. The dark circles from grading papers were gone. My skin looked like porcelain, my eyes wider and clearer. I looked like a porcelain doll version of myself. William, I whispered. The name hit me like a physical blow. In the novel, William was a nameless tutor mentioned exactly once in Chapter 3, a background character who died of a fever off-screen. A literal nobody. At least I'm alive, I thought, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. I'm a nobody in a fantasy world. I can just leave and live a quiet. Mama. The tiny, hesitant voice came from the shadows near the heavy oak door. I spun around. A small boy, perhaps 4 years old, stood there clutching a stuffed wolf. He had messy jet black hair and eyes the color of stormy amethysts. He looked like a miniature version of the man I had spent months dreaming about. Mama, you're awake, the boy sniffled, his lip trembling. The doctor said you wouldn't wake up for a long time. Before I could process the word mama, he lunged forward, burying his face in my silk-covered knees. He was warm, real, and smelled like baby powder and tears. My hands hovered over him, shaking. I couldn't find the words. Is he bothering you? The voice was like velvet over gravel. Deep, cold, and dangerously familiar. I looked up, and the breath left my lungs. Standing in the doorway was the man who had haunted my bookmarks. Duke Alaric von Schwarzwald, the great villain. The alpha who burned down half the kingdom because he was obsessed with the protagonist, Leo. He was taller than I imagined, his shoulders broad, his silver white hair slicked back. But his eyes, the same amethyst as the boy's, were cold enough to freeze my blood. Alaric. I breathed the name instinctively. The Duke's eyes narrowed. You usually prefer, Your Grace. Or have you forgotten your place during your little accident? I don't understand, I stammered, clutching the little boy closer as a protective instinct I didn't know I had flared up. This child, he called me. Don't play the fool, William. Alaric stepped into the light, his presence suffocating. You may be an Omega, but you are the Duchess of this house in name only. You birthed the heir to the Schwarzwald line. Do not pretend your memory is as fragile as your constitution. My brain stalled. Omega. Birthed. In the original novel, Alaric was a bachelor, a man driven mad by unrequited love for Leo, the crown prince's lover. There was never a mention of a wife, let alone a son. He was supposed to be stalking the MC and trying to destroy the ML, Julian. You have a son? I asked, my voice trembling. Alaric let out a short, bitter bark of a laugh. He walked toward the bed, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. I could smell the scent of alpha, bitter chocolate and winter frost. It made my stomach flip in a way that wasn't entirely fear. Lucian is the only reason you are still in this wing of the castle and not in the dungeons, Alaric hissed. I know you hate me. I know you hate this marriage that was forced upon us by the late king. But do not take your spite out on the boy. I don't hate him, I blurted out, hugging the boy. Lucian, tighter. Lucian looked up at me with wide, hopeful eyes. I would never hate a child. Alaric paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his stoic face. He straightened his back, adjusting his leather gloves. Your personality is as erratic as ever. Rest. Tomorrow, the imperial ball takes place. You are expected to be there, though I know your eyes will be searching for the crown prince the entire night. The prince. Julian. I shook my head. No, I don't care about him. Alaric's expression darkened. He reached out, his thumb bruisingly firm as it gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. Liar, he whispered. You spent years trying to get Julian's attention before you were sold to me. If I catch you looking at him, or his precious Leo, with longing tomorrow, I will ensure you never leave this room again. Do you understand, my Omega? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned on his heel and strode out, his cape billowing behind him like a shadow. I sat there in the dark, the weight of a 4-year-old in my arms and a world of questions in my head. I had transmigrated into my favorite book, yes. But the plot was broken, the villain was my husband, and apparently, I was an Omega who had once been in love with the hero. I looked down at Lucian, who was now drifting off to sleep against my chest. Well, I whispered into his soft hair, as far as nobody rolls go, this is a bit more sparkle than I asked for. I reached out and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, I had to face a ball, a broken plot, and a husband who hated me but was the only person I'd ever truly loved, even if he was just ink and paper until an hour ago. The drama, it seemed, was just beginning. The next morning, the sun bled through the velvet curtains like an unwelcome intruder. I didn't get much sleep. It's hard to rest when your brain is screaming that you've swapped a chalkboard for a coronet and a grading rubric for a toddler. As I climbed out of the massive bed, I felt a slight tug on my silk nightshirt. I looked down. Lucian was there, standing in the shadows of the bedframe. He didn't say a word. He just held a tiny piece of my hem in his fist, his knuckles white. Lucian, do you want to go get breakfast? I asked softly. He flinched, his amethyst eyes wide with a fear that broke my heart. Are you going to the city, Mama? The maids said, they said when you wake up, you'll go to the jewelry shops and not come back for 3 days. The original William must have been a real piece of work. I knelt down, ignoring the ache in my joints, and looked him in the eye. I'm not going anywhere except the dining hall. And I'd really like it if you came with me. He didn't let go of my shirt. As we walked through the sprawling hallways of the Schwarzwald estate, Lucian followed exactly 3 inches behind me, a silent, trembling shadow. The walk to the dining hall felt like walking a literal gauntlet. We passed a line of maids polishing silver. As soon as I approached, the chatter died. Look at him, I heard a whisper from a girl with a sharp bob. Wakes up from a faint, and immediately heads for the kitchen. I wonder what expensive delicacy he'll demand today while the Duke is stressed about the border riots. Probably wants more bird's nest soup to restore his glow, an older woman grumbled, not even bothering to bow as I passed. Poor Master Lucian, look how he's shaking. The beast is back. I stopped in my tracks. The servants gasped, expecting a tantrum. Instead, I turned to the older woman. The dust on that vase behind you is thick enough to plant potatoes in, I said, my voice calm but carrying that authority I'd honed for years. If you have time to critique my skincare routine, you have time to find a cloth. And Lucian isn't shaking because of me, he's shaking because you're whispering like a bunch of hens in front of a child. The hallway went dead silent. The older maid's mouth hung open. I didn't wait for a response. I gently took Lucian's hand, his tiny palm was sweaty, and kept walking. The dining hall was a cavern of cold marble. At the head of the table sat Alaric. He was dressed in a black military tunic, reading a series of reports. He didn't look up when we entered. I've already authorized the transfer to your personal account, Alaric said, his voice like a winter breeze. Take the carriage. Buy whatever diamonds it takes to keep you quiet during the ball tonight. Just try not to bankrupt the duchy before noon. I pulled out a chair for Lucian, tucked his napkin in, which made the butler, Mr. Henderson, drop a spoon in shock, and sat down. I don't want the money, Alaric, I said. The Duke's quill snapped. He looked up, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. Excuse me, I don't need diamonds. I have plenty, I said, glancing at the rings on my fingers that probably cost more than my previous life's entire school district. I want to talk about Lucian's schedule. He seems lonely. Alaric leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Is this a new game? Financial guilt tripping? Or are you high on your smelling salts again? I'm serious, I said, reaching for a piece of toast and slathering it with jam before handing it to Lucian. The boy looked at the toast like it was a holy relic. He follows me like he's afraid I'll vanish. And the staff treats him like he's invisible. The staff treats him with respect, Alaric retorted. No, I countered, feeling the heat rise in my chest. They treat him like a burden that belongs to a beast. Your son is 4, Alaric. He needs a father who looks at him, not just reports about him. A heavy silence descended. The servants stood like statues. Alaric rose slowly, his alpha aura flaring. It felt like a physical weight, heavy and spicy, pressing down on my shoulders. You, Alaric hissed, walking toward me, the man who used this child as a bargaining chip for a marriage title, who ignored his cries for 3 years to attend tea parties in the capital, you were lecturing me on fatherhood. I didn't flinch. I was used to dealing with angry parents back at school. A duke was just a dad with a bigger budget. I know I was a mess, I said, choosing my words carefully. I can't change the past. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to the city today. I'm staying here, with him. Alaric searched my face, looking for the lie. For a second, his gaze softened, just a fraction, before hardening back into ice. Fine, waste your day playing house. But do not be late for the imperial carriage. If you embarrass me in front of Julian and Leo tonight, William, there will be consequences. He turned to leave, but Lucian let out a small, muffled, bye-bye, Papa. Alaric froze at the door. He didn't turn around. His shoulders stayed stiff, but he stayed still for one heartbeat longer than usual before disappearing into the hall. The rest of the morning was spent in the garden. I tried to teach Lucian how to make a crown out of daisies. Mama, Lucian whispered, his little hands clumsy with the stems. Yes, Peanut. Why are you nice? He looked at me with heartbreaking sincerity. Yesterday, you yelled because I touched your silk dress with sticky fingers. You said I was a mistake of a night. What's a mistake? My heart physically ached. I pulled him into a hug, burying my face in his neck. A mistake is something I said because I was a very, very silly person. You are the best thing in this whole big, scary castle. Okay. He squeezed me back, his tiny breaths hitching. I like the new mama. Can we keep you? I'm not going anywhere, I promised, though I wondered how long I could keep that promise in a world that wanted me to be a villainous extra. We were interrupted by a loud, dramatic cough. Standing by the rosebushes was a man in an outrageously flamboyant teal suit with a feathered hat. Baron Felix, the only friend the original William had, mostly because William paid for all his drinks. Willie, darling, Felix cried, waving a lace handkerchief. Why aren't you dressed? The jewelry auction starts in an hour, and you promised to outbid that countess for the Eye of the Sea, sapphire. We need to spend that duke's gold before it gets moldy. I looked at Felix, then at the terrified Lucian hiding behind my back. Felix, I said coldly. Go away. Felix blinked, his jaw dropping. Pardon, but the sapphire is a rock. This is a child, I pointed to Lucian. And from now on, the Duke's gold is going into a trust fund for Lucian's education, not your gambling debts. Now, leave before I tell the guards you're trespassing. Felix looked like I'd slapped him with a wet fish. You've gone mad. The fever turned your brain to porridge. He huffed, turning on his heel. Don't come crying to me when you're bored of playing, nanny. As he stomped away, Lucian looked up at me, a tiny, genuine smile breaking across his face. Mama is scary. I laughed, ruffling his hair. Sometimes, you have to be scary to protect what matters. But as I looked toward the tall spires of the palace in the distance, my laughter faded. Tonight, I had to face the protagonists. I had to face the man my husband was obsessed with. And I had to do it all without letting Alaric see how much I actually liked the way he looked in that black tunic. The teacher in me was ready for the challenge. The fanboy in me, he was screaming into a pillow. The preparations for the imperial ball were less of a beauty treatment and more of a military interrogation. 4 maids surrounded me, scrubbing my skin until it was pink, while Mr. Henderson, the butler, stood by with a stopwatch. Lucian, true to his word, sat on a velvet stool in the corner, his eyes following my every move like I was a disappearing magic act. The Duke has requested you wear the Schwarzwald midnight set, the head maid, Martha, said with a sigh that suggested she'd rather be feeding me to wolves. She held up a heavy, dark silver doublet embroidered with real obsidian thread. It's a bit heavy, isn't it? I asked, looking at the high, stiff collar. It's the Duke's colors, Martha snapped. Usually, you complain it's too gloomy, and demand to wear canary yellow to stand out. If you want to change, do it now so we can all go home and pray for patience. I looked at the obsidian suit. It was beautiful, sharp, and slightly intimidating. No, I like it. It matches his eyes. The room went so silent you could hear a pin drop on the rug. Martha actually dropped the hairbrush. When I finally descended the grand staircase, Alaric was waiting at the bottom. He looked like a god of war carved out of granite. The black formal military regalia made him look broader, leaner, and utterly terrifying. He looked up as my boots clicked on the marble. His eyes traveled from my toes to my neatly styled hair, no flamboyant feathers, no excessive glitter. Just the dark, elegant obsidian. For the first time, the Duke looked stunned. His throat moved as he swallowed. "You're wearing the family colors," he remarked, his voice lower than usual. "I am a Schwarzwald, aren't I?" I said, trying to sound confident while my heart performed a drum solo. "At least for tonight." Alaric's gaze darkened at the "for tonight" part, but before he could snap back, a small weight hit my legs. "Mama, you look like a star," Lucian cried, hugging my knees. He was dressed in a matching miniature version of my suit. Alaric looked down at his son, then at me. "I told the nurses to take him to bed. This is an imperial event, William. Children do not belong at a gala where the crown prince is." "He's coming with us," I said firmly. Alaric narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me. He's the heir. People should see him. Plus," I leaned in, whispering so only Alaric could hear, "if I'm busy being a mother, I won't have time to longingly gaze at your precious Prince Julian, will I?" Alaric stiffened. The spicy, cold scent of his alpha pheromones flared, but it wasn't angry this time, it was flustered. "Fine. But if he cries, you are leaving the ballroom immediately." The palace was a nightmare of gold leaf and ego. As we were announced, the Duke and Duchess of Schwarzwald and the young Lord Lucian, the music didn't stop, but the whispering certainly did. "Is that William? In black? He looks different. Did he have work done on his face? And why did they bring the cursed child?" I felt Lucian's hand tighten in mine. I squeezed back and leaned down. "Chin up, Lucian. You're the most handsome person in this room. Everyone else just looks like a fancy pigeon." Lucian giggled, and the sound echoed in the sudden hush. Suddenly, the crowd parted. Emerging from the center were the stars of the show, Prince Julian and Leo. Julian was the classic ML, golden hair, blue eyes, looking like he'd never had a bad day in his life. Leo was the delicate MC, all white lace and doe eyes. In the book, I had loved them. Now, they looked like two people who spent way too much time in front of a mirror. "Alaric," Julian said, his voice booming with forced friendship. "I didn't think you'd show up. And William, you look surprisingly sober." Alaric's hand instinctively went to the small of my back, a possessive gesture that sent a jolt of electricity through my spine. "Your Highness, we came to show our respect." Leo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Alaric with a weird mix of pity and longing. "Duke Alaric, I heard your wife had a fall. I'm glad to see he's recovered. It must be so hard for you, managing the border in a difficult household." I felt my inner teacher's resting bitch face activate. "Oh, it's not difficult at all, Leo," I said, flashing a smile that was 100% sugar and 0% sincerity. "Once you stop focusing on things that don't belong to you, like other people's husbands or public sympathy, life becomes quite simple." Julian gasped. Leo's face turned bright red. Alaric's grip on my waist tightened so hard I thought he might snap my corset. "William," Julian hissed, "how dare you speak to Leo that way? He was only being kind." "Kindness usually doesn't involve insulting a person's marriage in the first sentence, Prince," I replied, picking up a glass of champagne from a passing tray. "But then again, I've been reading a lot of fiction lately. Some characters just lack development." To avoid a diplomatic crisis, I dragged Lucian toward the food. "Mama, can I have the red cake?" Lucian asked, pointing to a towering hibiscus tart. "Of course, baby." As I reached for it, a hand grabbed my wrist. I turned, expecting a guard. It was Alaric. He looked like he was vibrating between wanting to yell at me and wanting to kiss me. "What was that?" he demanded. "What?" "The tart. It's hibiscus," I said innocently. "The prince. You insulted the crown prince and Leo." Alaric hissed, pulling me into a secluded alcove behind a large fern. "I thought you hated Julian," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And I thought you were obsessed with Leo. Isn't it better for your obsession if I keep them away from you?" Alaric pinned me against the wall, his arms on either side of my head. He was breathing hard. You are acting like a different person. The William the First no would be crying for Julian's attention. Why are you looking at me instead? Maybe because you're the one who's actually here, I whispered, my heart hammering. And maybe because the Duke in my dreams didn't spend his time chasing a prince who doesn't want him. He spent it being a father. Alaric's gaze dropped to my lips. For a second, the villain looked completely vulnerable. Mama. I dropped my cake. The moment shattered. We both looked down to see Lucian standing there with a face full of red frosting and a shattered plate at his feet. I'll get the butler, Alaric said, clearing his throat and stepping back, his face a deep shade of crimson. No need, I laughed, wiping frosting off Lucian's nose with my expensive silk sleeve. A little mess never hurt anyone. Right, Your Grace. Alaric watched me clean the child. Nobody, William cleaning a mess instead of making one. Right, Alaric murmured, and for the first time, there was no ice in his voice. A little mess might be exactly what this family needs. But as we turned back to the party, I saw Leo watching us from the shadows, his face no longer looking delicate, but twisted with a very un-MC-like rage. The story was definitely changing. And I wasn't sure if the book would let me have a happy ending that easily. The air in the ballroom was getting stifling. Between the heavy scent of omega-attractant perfumes and the burning gaze of Alaric that seemed to follow my every move, I felt like I was overheating. Alaric, I need to find the washroom, I whispered, tugging at my obsidian collar. The hibiscus tart is sitting a bit heavy. Alaric looked at me, his thumb tracing the rim of his wine glass. For a second, the suspicion was gone, replaced by a strange, flickering concern. Do you need a maid to accompany you? Or should I? I'm a grown man, Alaric. I can find a bathroom without a military escort, I teased, ruffled Lucian's hair, and stepped away. I didn't make it to the washroom. As I turned the corner into the quiet, dimly lit north wing, a hand shot out from a doorway and hauled me inside. I stumbled, my boots catching on a thick Persian rug. What the? Quiet, William, a voice hissed. It was Prince Julian. He looked flushed, his crown slightly tilted. Before I could regain my balance, he shoved me against a chaise lounge. He didn't look romantic, he looked desperate. I don't know what game you're playing tonight, Julian growled, leaning over me, his hands pinning my shoulders down. Wearing black. Insulting Leo. Are you trying to make me jealous by acting like a dutiful wife to that monster Alaric? Get off me, Julian. I shoved at his chest, but he was an alpha, and I was in a body that hadn't seen a gym in 3 years. You're delusional. I don't want you. Liar, Julian sneered, his face inches from mine. You've been chasing me since we were children. You're just playing hard to get because Alaric is watching. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the private salon swung open with a bang that echoed like a cannon shot. William. Alaric's voice was a low, vibrating growl of pure thunder. I looked up, horrified. I was sprawled on the silk cushions with the crown prince looming over me, his hands on my shoulders. From the doorway, it looked exactly like a secret tryst. And Alaric wasn't alone. Half. The royal court was behind him, including a wide-eyed Lucian and a trembling Leo. Oh my goodness, Leo gasped, his voice high and melodic, vibrating with practiced shock. He tucked himself under Alaric's arm as if seeking protection. William, how could you? In the middle of the imperial ball. With the prince. It's not what it looks like. I scrambled to stand up, smoothing my doublet. He pulled me in here. I can't believe this, Leo continued, his eyes welling with tears. Duke Alaric, I am so sorry. I knew William was impulsive, but to lure Julian away while your poor son is right there. It's just so cruel. He must have been planning this all night with that new attitude. Julian, seeing the crowd, immediately stepped back and put on his noble victim face. He adjusted his sleeves, looking at Alaric with a fake expression of guilt. Alaric, please, Julian said, his voice loud enough for the gossiping nobles to hear. Don't blame yourself. Your wife, he caught me in the hall. He said he couldn't stand being married to a villain anymore. He begged me to take him away. He offered himself to me right here. I was trying to let him down gently. The room erupted in whispers. Disgusting. Poor Duke Alaric, tied to such a tramp. He used the child as a cover. I looked at Alaric. His face was a mask of cold, dead stone. His eyes were fixed on me, and for a second, I saw it, the old wound opening up. The belief that he was unlovable, that he was truly the villain everyone said he was, and that I was just another person who hated him. Alaric, I said, my voice cracking. Look at my clothes. What? Julian snapped. What do your clothes have to do? If I were seducing a prince, I said, stepping toward Alaric, ignoring the gasps of the nobles, would I be wearing the colors of the man I supposedly hate? Would I have spent the last 3 hours holding my son's hand? William, stop lying, Leo cried out, stepping forward. We all saw you. You were always obsessed with Julian. You told me yourself at the last tea party that Alaric was a monster you had to endure. I looked at Leo. The kind protagonist. The innocent Omega. That was the old William, Leo. And you know it. You also know that Julian has the strength of an alpha. If I wanted to leave this room, could I have? Look at the door, Alaric. Is there a lock on the inside? Alaric's gaze flicked to the door. Julian, Alaric said, his voice so quiet it was scarier than a scream. You say he lured you here? Yes. He was throwing himself at me. Julian insisted, sensing the Duke's power. Then why? Alaric stepped into the room, his aura expanding until the candles flickered. Does the scent in this room smell like your aggression, Julian? And why does my wife smell like fear and hibiscus tart? Alaric walked past the prince as if he were a piece of trash on the road. He stopped right in front of me. I waited for the blow, for the divorce papers, for the dungeon. Instead, Alaric reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His hand was shaking, not with sadness, but with a murderous rage directed at everyone else in the room. Leo, Alaric said, not even looking at the boy. Your sweet talk is starting to sound like a confession of conspiracy. And Julian, if you ever touch what is mine again, I won't just try to destroy you. I will finish the job. You would threaten the crown prince for him. Julian stammered. He's a nobody. He's a gold digger. He is the mother of my child, Alaric growled, turning to face the crowd. And he is the only person in this room who hasn't lied to me tonight. Now, get out. All of you. The room cleared in seconds. Even Leo scurried away, his innocence failing to protect him from Alaric's killing intent. Only Lucian remained at the door, looking confused. I sank onto the chaise lounge, my legs finally giving out. You believed me. Alaric stood over me, his shadow long and imposing. He didn't answer immediately. He picked up a discarded silk scarf from the floor, Julian's, and threw it into the fireplace. I didn't believe you because I trust your character, William, Alaric said, his voice rough. I believed you because for the first time in 4 years, you looked at me like I was the only person in the world when they were all pointing fingers. He sat down next to me, the weight of his body tilting the cushions. But, he added, a hint of the old, dangerous Duke returning, if you ever go to the bathroom for 40 minutes again, I'm tearing the palace down. Understood. I let out a wet, hysterical laugh and leaned my head on his shoulder. Understood, Your Grace. Lucian ran over and climbed into both our laps, a tiny obsidian-clad bridge between a villain and a nobody. Mama, Lucian whispered, can we go home now? I don't like the golden man. He smells like mean soup. Me too, Peanut, I whispered. Me too. But as we left, I felt a chill. The plot of The Crown of Thorns wasn't just broken anymore. I had declared war on the main characters. And in this world, the author usually didn't let the nobody win without a fight. The carriage ride back to the Schwarzwald estate was the quietest and loudest trip of my life. Quiet, because Alaric sat across from me like a brooding obsidian statue, his arms crossed over his chest. Loud, because my brain was screaming, the villain just chose me over the main character. Is this real life? Lucian was fast asleep, his head pillowed on my lap, snoring like a tiny, dignified dragon. Alaric's eyes flickered to the window, then to me, then back to the window. His scent, usually a sharp, intimidating frost, now smelled suspiciously like confused puppy. You, Alaric finally spoke, his voice cracking the silence. You called Julian's fragrance mean soup earlier. To his face. Technically, Lucian called it that. I just agreed, I said, suppressing a grin. Why? Are you worried I hurt the crown prince's feelings? He seemed more worried about his hair than his dignity. Alaric's lips quirked. It wasn't a full smile, that would probably cause a localized earthquake, but it was close. His fragrance is a rare extract from the blue lilies of the north. It costs more than a small village. Well, the small village is being ripped off, I snorted. He smelled like a wet floral shop that had been hit by lightning. You, on the other hand. I stopped, my face heating up. What? Alaric leaned forward, his amethyst eyes locking onto mine. You smell like expensive winter, I muttered, looking at my boots. It's better. Much better. The Duke didn't say anything, but the air in the carriage suddenly felt about 10 degrees warmer. The next morning, I woke up to a weight on my chest. It wasn't Lucian. It was a giant, fluffy, white cat that looked like it had swallowed a smaller, angrier cat. Who are you? I wheezed, trying to sit up. That is, the Admiral, a voice drawled from the doorway. Alaric was standing there, not in his armor or military tunic, but in a silk dressing gown that left way too much of his chest exposed. He was holding a cup of tea. He belongs to you, Alaric continued, watching me struggle with the feline. You bought him last month to spite the allergic Countess Ravenloft. You've ignored him ever since. He usually spends his days shredding the curtains in the East Wing. The Admiral. I looked at the cat. The cat looked at me with pure, unadulterated judgment. Well, Admiral, change of plans. No more curtain shredding. We're going to have a spa day. A what? Alaric asked, raising an eyebrow. A spa day. And you're invited. 2 hours later, the great Duke of Schwarzwald, the man feared by 3 kingdoms, was kneeling on a tiled floor, covered in bubbles, holding a very wet, very angry cat. William, Alaric growled, a glob of soap suds landing on his nose. I have led armies through the Iron Pass. I have survived 3 assassination attempts this year. Why am I scrubbing a cat in a golden tub? Because it's a bonding exercise. I laughed, sitting on the edge of the tub with Lucian, who was busy, helping, by dumping a bucket of rubber ducks into the water. Look, Lucian, Papa is a natural at animal husbandry. Papa is bubbly. Lucian cheered, splashing water onto Alaric's expensive silk trousers. Alaric looked at his ruined clothes, then at Lucian's beaming face, and finally at me. I was laughing so hard I almost fell off the tub. You're doing this on purpose, Alaric accused, but there was no heat in it. He reached into the suds, flicked a finger, and sent a glob of foam flying right into my face. I gasped, wiping my eye. Oh, it is on, Your Grace. For the next 20 minutes, the villain's mansion sounded like a playground. We had a full-scale bubble war. At one point, Alaric managed to get Lucian into a bubble beard, and the boy was running around the bathroom pretending to be a Santa Alpha. It was the most human I'd ever seen Alaric. The cold, calculating Duke was buried under a pile of lavender-scented suds. The fun was interrupted by Mr. Henderson, who knocked on the door looking like he wanted to retire immediately. Your Grace, Master William, a delivery has arrived from the palace. For the Duchess. I dried myself off, threw on a robe, and headed to the foyer, Alaric trailing behind me like a protective, slightly damp shadow. The foyer was filled with flowers. Red roses. Hundreds of them. Who sent these? I asked, picking up a card. It read, to the most captivating star of last night. My behavior was uncouth, but your fire is what I have always craved. Let us speak in private. J. Julian, I whispered, horrified. The man is a stalker. The temperature in the room plummeted. I didn't need to look behind me to know Alaric was there. The bubbly dad was gone. The Blood Duke had returned. Henderson, Alaric said, his voice a low, terrifying hum. Yes, Your Grace. Burn them. All of them. Use the petals to mulch the pig pens. At once, Your Grace. Alaric stepped closer to me, his presence looming. He took the card from my hand and ripped it into tiny, microscopic pieces. He thinks he can send flowers to my house. To my Omega. Alaric's jaw was set so tight I thought his teeth might break. Alaric, I don't want them, I said, reaching out to touch his arm. I told you, he's a mean soup person. I prefer winter. Alaric looked at me, his eyes searching mine for any sign of regret. He suddenly grabbed my waist and pulled me flush against him. He smelled like the soap we'd just used, lavender and bubbles, mixed with that intoxicating alpha scent. I am a jealous man, William, he whispered into my ear, sending shivers down my spine. The novel might call me a villain, but a villain keeps what is his. If that golden brat sends so much as a letter again, I'll march the Black Knights into the capital. Is that a threat or a promise? I teased, though my heart was racing. It's a fact, Alaric growled. Mama, Papa. Lucian came running out, holding the now dry and very fluffy Admiral. Look, the kitty found a mouse. Alaric immediately let go of me, coughing into his hand, his ears turning a bright, traitorous red. A mouse. Right. Lucian, let's go, put the mouse outside. Now. I watched them walk away, the giant Duke and the tiny boy, both obsessed with a cat and a mouse. I leaned against the wall, smiling. I had transmigrated into a tragedy, but somehow, I had turned it into a romantic comedy. Take that, Julian, I thought. The nobody just won the husband of the century. The air in the manor didn't just turn cold, it turned static. I was sitting in the garden with Lucian, trying to explain the concept of a paper plane, when a searing pain lanced through my skull. It felt like a hot needle stitching through my brain. System synchronization, 100%. Anomaly detected. Character, William, persists beyond Chapter 3. Recalibrating plot constraints. Forcing canon event. A blue, translucent screen flickered in front of my eyes, one only I could see. My breath hitched. I looked at Lucian, but his face had gone blank. His amethyst eyes, usually so full of life, were glazed over, staring at a butterfly as if he were a mannequin. Lucian. I reached out, but my hand stopped an inch from his shoulder. An invisible wall, an interface, blocked me. Warning. Interaction with sub-character, Lucian, is restricted. He is currently invisible to the plot. I scrambled up and ran toward Alaric's study. I needed to tell him. I needed to hear him growl about mean soup, or feel his possessive grip on my waist. I burst through the doors without knocking. Alaric, something is wrong. The sky, the air, it feels like code. Alaric was standing by the window. He didn't turn around. His posture was rigid, like a soldier on a parade ground. Alaric. I walked closer, my heart hammering. When he finally turned, my blood turned to slush. The warmth I'd seen in the bathhouse, the jealousy in the foyer, it was gone. His eyes were flat, mechanical. William, he said, his voice a perfect, hollow monotone. Why are you here? I am busy preparing a tribute for Leo. The crown prince does not deserve him. I must find a way to separate them. Leo is the only thing that matters. What? I choked out. Alaric, look at me. It's me. We washed the cat yesterday. You hated the roses. Alaric looked through me as if I were made of glass. I do not recall a cat. I only recall the scent of white lilies. Leo loves them. I must send a carriage to the northern border to harvest them. Alaric, please. I grabbed his arm, but his skin felt like cold marble. He didn't even flinch. Step aside, extra, he said. Extra. The word twisted like a knife. You're being controlled. I screamed at him, tears blurring my vision. Fight it. You said you keep what's yours. I'm yours. Alaric paused for a microsecond. A flicker of purple light flashed in his eyes, a momentary struggle against the system. His hand jerked, his fingers twitching as if trying to reach for my face. Critical error. Character, Alaric, attempting script deviation. Reinforcing obsession protocol. The flicker died. Alaric shoved my hand off his arm with a strength that bruised. Do not touch me, Omega. You are merely a tutor I was forced to wed. My heart belongs to the protagonist. Now, leave. I have a war to plan against Julian. I stumbled out of the study, sobbing, only to find the hallway filled with the servants. But they weren't the gossiping hens from before. They were moving in sync, their faces devoid of expression. The master is so devoted to Lord Leo, Martha the maid said, her voice sounding like a pre-recorded track. Yes, the butler replied. The Duchess is truly a nobody. It is a pity he is still here. I ran to my room and slammed the door, but the blue screen followed me. Plot correction commencing. Current chapter 3 extended. Scheduled event. Death of Tutor William by lung fever accident. Time remaining 2 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. No, I whispered, clutching my chest. The perfect skin I'd inherited suddenly felt clammy. A sharp, burning cough erupted from my throat. I looked at my palm. Blood. Bright, crimson, digital blood. I won't die, I hissed at the screen. I'm a teacher. I don't follow rules that don't make sense. I dragged my weakening body back to the garden. I found Lucian sitting exactly where I'd left him. He hadn't moved a muscle. He was a 4-year-old prop in a story that didn't need him anymore. Lucian, I wheezed, falling to my knees beside him. Listen to me. I know you can't hear me properly, but I'm fighting. I'm staying for you. I looked up at the balcony of the manor. Alaric was standing there, staring toward the capital, toward Leo. He looked like the villain the book wanted him to be. Cold, obsessed, destined for execution. Alaric von Schwarzwald. I shouted, my voice breaking. The Duke's head tilted slightly, but he didn't look down. You told me a villain keeps what is his. I coughed, more blood staining the grass. If you let me die like this, you're not a villain. You're just a puppet. Is that all you are? A toy for a story. Warning. Harmful metadata detected. Accelerating death clock. 0 hours 5 minutes and 0 seconds. My lungs felt like they were filling with lead. My vision began to darken at the edges. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and managed to touch Lucian's cold, still hand. Wake up, I whispered. Both of you, please wake up. In the distance, I heard the faint sound of a system alert. Error. Error. Character. Alaric. Pulse rate stabilizing at abnormal levels. Logic loop detected. Winter. Scent overriding. White lily. Protocol. On the balcony, Alaric's hand gripped the stone railing so hard the marble began to crack. His head jerked violently to the side. Liam. The voice was faint, but it wasn't mechanical. It was the velvet over gravel voice I loved. But my strength was gone. I collapsed onto the grass, the system's countdown reaching the final seconds. 0 hours 0 minutes and 3 seconds. 0 hours 0 minutes and 2 seconds. 0 hours 0 minutes and 1 second. Mama. A small, warm hand gripped mine. Lucian's eyes were back, stormy, amethyst, and terrified. Mama, don't sleep. The kitty is hungry. Papa is crying. I felt a shadow fall over me. A pair of strong, shaking arms scooped me up. The scent of bitter chocolate and winter frost flooded my senses, more powerful than any system code. Break, Alaric's voice roared, directed not at me, but at the very sky itself. I don't care about the story. Break. The blue screen shattered into a million digital shards. The static in the air vanished. I looked up, gasping for air that finally felt real again. Alaric was looking at me, tears streaming down his face, his, obsessed, mask shattered. William, he choked out, pressing his forehead against mine. I saw a white lily, and I hated it. I only wanted the obsidian. You fought it, I whispered, reaching up to touch his face. I am a villain, remember? Alaric growled, his grip tightening. And the villain doesn't let the author take his ending. Especially not this one. But as the shards of the system dissolved, a new message appeared in dark, blood-red text. Administrator intervention required. Plot totally derailed. Preparing hard reboot. We weren't safe yet. The world was trying to delete us, and we were running out of chapters. The hard reboot had failed, but the world felt like it was held together by frayed stitches. While the Duke's manor returned to a semblance of warmth, Alaric refusing to leave my side for even a second, his hand constantly anchored to my waist, the imperial palace was drowning in a different kind of silence. In the center of the prince's private gardens, Leo sat on a white marble bench. To any passing guard, he looked like a grieving saint, his head bowed, clutching a rosary. But beneath the golden fringe of his hair, his eyes were glowing with a frantic, rhythmic blue light. Error. Protagonist, Leo, attempting unauthorized system override. Warning. Account privileges exceeded. Shut up, Leo whispered, his voice devoid of his usual honeyed sweetness. I built this world. I am the center. If the extra won't die, then the extra must be erased manually. For years, Leo hadn't just been a character. He was the player. He had used the system to charm Alaric into obsession and Julian into a puppet. He lived for the drama, the longing, and the power of being the world's most beloved victim. But William, the boring school teacher who should have been a corpse by now, was a glitch he couldn't patch. Julian, Leo said, not looking up as the crown prince approached. Leo, my love, Julian knelt at his feet, looking haggard. The Duke, he threatened me. He chose that nobody over us. I feel like I'm losing my mind. My thoughts don't feel like my own. Leo reached out and traced Julian's jaw. A spark of blue static jumped from his fingertip to Julian's skin. The prince's eyes glazed over instantly. That's because you're being weak, Julian, Leo purred. William is a demon. He's used dark magic to bewitch Alaric and steal the heir. If he lives, the kingdom will fall into shadow. You want to be a hero, don't you? A hero? Julian repeated, his voice hollow. Yes, I must save the kingdom. Then kill the glitch, Leo whispered, his face twisting into a jagged, beautiful mask of malice. Kill William. Tonight. I'll give you the assassination protocol code. No one will remember he ever existed. Back at the Schwarzwald estate, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of tension. Alaric, you've been staring at that door for 3 hours, I said, leaning against the bedpost. The guards are outside. Lucian is asleep. Even the admiral is on high alert. You need to rest. Alaric didn't move. He was sitting in a chair facing the bedroom door, his greatsword, the winter's bite, resting across his knees. He looked like a king waiting for a war he couldn't see. The air smells like ozone, William, Alaric said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. The system you spoke of. I can still feel it scratching at the back of my skull. It wants me to go to the palace. It wants me to crave Leo. But every time I close my eyes, I only see you falling in the garden. I walked over and sat on the floor between his knees, resting my head on his armored thigh. I'm right here. I'm not a memory yet. Alaric reached down, his heavy, calloused hand trembling as he stroked my hair. I never liked the prince. Even before the script. I always thought he was a vain fool. But Leo was like a fever. I couldn't stop thinking about him, even though I didn't know why. It's called protagonist halo, I joked weakly. It's a very annoying literary device. Whatever it is, Alaric growled, leaning down to press a firm, lingering kiss to my forehead. If he tries to reboot my heart again, I'll rip the heart out of this world myself. We stayed like that for a long time, the silence of the room wrapped around us. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe we had won. I forgot that in a novel, the most dangerous moment isn't the battle, it's the quiet scene right before the climax. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the hallway, the sound of a glass vase shattering. Alaric was on his feet before the sound even finished. Stay here. Do not move. Alaric, wait. But he was already out the door, his alpha aura exploding outward like a shockwave. I heard the sound of steel clashing in the distance. I stood there, heart pounding, when a cold draft hit the back of my neck. The balcony doors, which I had locked myself, were wide open. The curtains were fluttering like ghostly wings. You really are a persistent little bug, aren't you? I spun around. Prince Julian stood there, but he didn't look like the golden prince from the ball. His eyes were entirely blue, no pupils, no irises, just glowing, digital static. He held a dagger that seemed to be made of flickering pixels. Julian, you're being controlled. Stop. I backed away, my heel catching on the rug. The administrator says you're a virus, Julian said, his voice overlapping with a second, higher-pitched voice, Leo's voice. Viruses must be quarantined. Or deleted. He lunged. I scrambled behind a heavy oak desk, throwing a stack of books at him. I'm a human being, you lunatic. Not a line of code. In this world, there is no difference. Julian roared, smashing the desk with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. I ran for the door, but the room began to glitch. The floor turned into a void of black squares. The walls stretched and warped. I was trapped in a digital cage. Mama. My heart stopped. Lucian was standing in the doorway of the nursery, rubbing his eyes, holding his stuffed wolf. Mama, why is the golden man glowing? Lucian. Run. Find Papa. I screamed. Julian turned his head toward the child, his neck cracking with a mechanical sound. The sub-character. An unnecessary branch of the story. I'll delete him first. No. I didn't think. I didn't have a sword or magic. I had the one thing the system couldn't account for, the protective rage of a teacher who loved his student. I tackled Julian from the side, my fingers clawing at his face. The pixelated dagger sliced through my shoulder, a cold, numbing pain spreading instantly. Critical damage detected. User, William, status, corrupted. Julian raised the dagger for a final strike, his face twisted into Leo's triumphant smirk. Goodbye, extra. Suddenly, the wall of the bedroom didn't just break, it disintegrated. Alaric charged through the debris, his eyes glowing a deep, murderous purple that rivaled the system's blue. He didn't use his sword. He caught Julian's wrist with his bare hand and snapped it. The pixelated dagger fell to the floor, dissolving into smoke. "You," Alaric hissed, his voice echoing with a power that shook the very foundations of the mansion. "You dared to enter my home. You dared to touch my son. You dared to bleed my wife." Alaric picked Julian up by the throat, slamming him against the warped, glitching wall. "Tell your administrator, tell Leo, that if he wants a villain, I will show him one that will burn his entire story to ash." With a roar of pure, unbridled alpha strength, Alaric threw Julian through the balcony doors, sending him plummeting into the rose bushes below. The glitches in the room began to fade, the floor returning to solid wood. Alaric turned to me, his armor cracked, his face covered in dust and Julian's blood. "William." He dropped to his knees, pulling me into his arms. I'm okay," I gasped, clutching my bleeding shoulder. "Lucian, is he?" Lucian ran into the circle of our arms, sobbing loudly. The golden man was scary. "Papa, make the blue lights go away." Alaric held us both, his body shaking with a primal, desperate need to protect. But as I looked out at the moon, I saw it, the sky was flickering. Leo wasn't going to stop at an assassination. He was going to delete the entire world just to get rid of me. "Alaric," I whispered, looking into his amethyst eyes. "We have to go to the palace. We have to end this at the source. Before the end appears for all of us." Alaric nodded, his jaw set. "Then we go. We'll write our own final chapter." The imperial palace didn't look like a home anymore, it looked like a crumbling simulation. The marble pillars were flickering into wireframe, and the sky above was a swirling vortex of static and ink. Alaric stormed through the grand gates, Lucian strapped to his back in a sturdy leather harness and me leaning against his side. Every step Alaric took cracked the ground, his alpha aura so potent it seemed to stabilize the reality around us. "There," I pointed to the high balcony. Leo stood there, bathed in a sickening blue light. Julian lay unconscious at his feet, discarded like a broken toy. Leo's face was no longer beautiful, it was a frantic mess of twitching pixels. "You're late for your execution, William." Leo screamed, his voice echoing with the mechanical screech of 1,000 distorted speakers. "The story is over. If I can't be the beloved protagonist, I'll delete the save file. I'll burn every page. System deletion, 85% complete. Object, Schwarzwald Manor. Deleted. Object, Citizens. Deleted. Stop it, Leo," I shouted, my voice straining against the digital wind. "This isn't a game to us. Alaric isn't a stat block, and Lucian isn't a subplot. We're real. Real." Leo laughed hysterically. "You're a teacher who tripped in the street. You're a glitch. Alaric, come to me. I am your destiny. I am the one you were written to love." Alaric stepped forward, his heavy boots clanking on the stone. He looked up at the protagonist, with nothing but cold, pure disgust. "I don't know what a stat block is," Alaric's voice boomed, vibrating with a power that made the blue light flicker. "And I don't care about your destiny. I remember the fever you put in my head. I remember the hollow ache of chasing a ghost while my son cried in the dark. You aren't a savior, Leo. You're a parasite. I am the MC." Leo shrieked, hitting a holographic keyboard in the air. "I'll delete your memories. I'll make you kill him. Force command, Alpha Alaric to kill Omega William." Alaric's body jerked. His eyes flashed blue for a split second. His hand flew to the hilt of his sword. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Papa." Lucian's small voice piped up from Alaric's back. "Papa, your heart is beating really fast. Are you okay?" Alaric let out a guttural roar, his muscles bulging as he fought the invisible strings of the system. He didn't draw his sword to strike me. Instead, he plunged the blade into the ground, using it as an anchor. "I am a villain," Alaric screamed, the force of his will shattering the blue light around his head. "And a villain never obeys the hero." With a final, earth-shaking surge of strength, Alaric lunged upward, leaping the distance to the balcony in a single bound. He didn't strike Leo with metal. He grabbed the translucent blue screen in the air and tore it in half with his bare hands. Critical system failure. Administrator disconnected. Rewriting. The blue light exploded into white. When I opened my eyes, the static was gone. The sky was a soft, bruised purple, the color of a real twilight. The palace was still standing, but the glowing screens and the system prompts were nowhere to be seen. I looked down. I was still William. My shoulder was bandaged, and I felt heavy. For the first time, I didn't feel like a character in a book. I felt like a man standing on solid ground. Mama. Lucian was sitting on the grass, blinking. Beside him, Alaric was on one knee, his armor ruined, his silver hair a mess. He looked exhausted, human, and incredibly handsome. Is it over? I whispered. Alaric looked at the balcony. Leo was gone, not dead, but diminished. He was sitting on the floor, his halo gone, looking like a very ordinary, very frightened young man. Julian was waking up, rubbing his head and looking confusedly at his own hands. The script is dead, Alaric said, standing up and walking toward me. I can't feel the itching anymore. I can't feel the pull toward the palace. I only feel. He stopped, his face softening into a genuine, tired smile. I only feel hungry. And I want to go home. The manor was deleted, I reminded him sadly. Alaric smirked, that arrogant Duke energy returning. I'm the richest man in the kingdom, William. We'll build a new one. With a bigger bathtub for the cat. 1 year later, the new Schwarzwald estate was less of a fortress and more of a home. There were fewer gargoyles and more flower beds. I was in the library, which was now filled with actual books, not just plot devices. I had started a school for the local children. Turns out, being a teacher is a lot easier when you don't have to worry about being deleted by an author. William, the Admiral is stuck in the chimney again. Alaric's voice echoed through the house. I looked up to see him walking in, carrying a muddy Lucian under one arm. Alaric was wearing a simple linen shirt, his sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the domesticated villain. He's not stuck, Alaric. He's hunting, I said, setting down my pen. He's covered in soot and screaming, Alaric countered, sitting on the edge of my desk. He reached out and pulled me into the crook of his arm. Lucian wiggled down and ran to the corner to play with his toy knights. I'm the Duke. I'm saving the mama from the dragon. Alaric laughed, a deep, warm sound that filled my chest with heat. He turned my face toward his amethyst eyes glowing with a quiet, steady devotion. You know, I whispered, in the original book, this is where Alaric was supposed to be executed. Alaric hummed, nuzzling into my neck. A shame. The author clearly didn't know how to write a good ending. And what is the ending? I asked, leaning into him. This isn't an ending, William, Alaric murmured, his lips brushing against mine. It's just the first page of the sequel. And this time, I'm the one holding the pen. He kissed me then, a slow, deep kiss that tasted like winter frost and bitter chocolate, but mostly, it tasted like a life that was finally, truly, mine. The end.